Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo
Canto 9, chapter 9, text 16 and 17. Suddha-bhakti jagye tasyanavotaro bhavat sindhu-dvipastatastasmat ayutayustato bhavat rituparno nalasako yosavidyam hayannalat datvaksha hidayam chasmai sarvakamastu tat-sutam. I'm just going to read the translation. Bhagirata had a son named Shruta, whose son was Naba. This son was different from the Naba previously described. Naba had a son named Sindhu-dvip. From Sindhu-dvip came Ayutayu, and from Ayutayu came Rituparna, who became a friend of Nalaraj. Rituparna taught Nalaraj the art of gambling, and Nalaraj gave Rituparna lessons in controlling and maintaining horses. The son of Rituparna was Sarvakama. You can see the prophet's purport. Gambling is also an art. Kshatriyas are allowed to exhibit talent in this art of gambling. By the grace of Krishna, the Pandavas lost everything by gambling and were deprived of their kingdom, wife, family, and home because they were not expert in the gambling art. In other words, a devotee may not be expert in materialistic activities. It is therefore advised in the Shastra that materialistic activities are not at all suitable for the living entities, especially the devotees. A devotee should therefore be satisfied to eat whatever is sent as prasad by the Supreme Lord. A devotee remains pure because he does not take to sinful activities such as gambling, intoxication, meat eating, and illicit sex. Gora Draganya Ganagota Goloruharam Gauranga Gudatama Gopyada Kopa Briksham Gopala Gadaratidam Yati Singha Gora Govinda Deshikavaram Satatam Namami. Chanakya Pandit describes in one place, he says, Prartar Juta Prasangena Madhyane Stri Prasangataha Ratro Chora Prasangena Kalo Gatshanti Dimatam. He says that those persons who are Dimatam, who are wise, Prator, they spend their mornings Juti Prasangena, speaking about gambling. Madhyane, in the afternoon, they speak about Stri Sangha, about association with women. Ratro, in the evening, Chora Prasangena, they speak about the activities of theft. That's the activity of a wise person. So, what Chanakya is saying here is a little coded. The morning refers to the gambling of Yudhishthira Maharaj. And the Madhyane, Stri Prasanga, the afternoon discussions about the activities of women, refers to the glorious activities of Sita, the wife of Lord Ramachandra. And Ratro Chora Prasangena refers to the evening pastimes, or the pastimes of Krishna when he was stealing butter and stealing different activities. In other words, Chanakya is advising wise persons to spend their mornings absorbed in the Mahabharata, the afternoon reading Ramayana, and the evening devotedly hearing the Bhagavatam. So, what I want to speak about today is a little difficult for a lot of people to understand. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, in a number of places, chastised the mundane moralists. And for people who want to try to understand spiritual life, they generally look at it through the lens of mundane religion. And therefore, in his Manasiksha, Srila Raghunath Das Goswami, in the second verse, he emphatically states, Na dharmam shruti gana niruktam kila kuru braje radha krishna prachura paricharyam nihatanu sachi sunam nandishvara patisuttatve guruvaram mukunda prestatve smara paramajasram nanumana. This is my dear mind. Na dharmam shutigana niruktam kilakuru. Don't worry about what is dharma or adharma, religious activities or irreligious activities. Don't become absorbed in meditating on the Shruti-gana niruktam kilakuru, the pious activities which someone may perform as advised in the Shrutis and the Vedas. Rather just Bhaje Radha Krishna Prachura Paricharyam Ihatuna Tanu. You should just become absorbed in serving Sri Sri Radha and Krishna. And remember Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that he's the son of Nanda Maharaj, he's Krishna, and Mukunda Prestat Ves, Madhapada Majasram, that my Gurudev is most dear to Lord Mukunda. It's amazing to me that Srila Prabhupada was able to come to the West and give Krishna consciousness. It's very, very, because it's the most irreligious place. It's a very interesting point, because Krishna consciousness begins really from the end of Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna tells Arjuna that Mama Navabhamad Bhakto Majaji Mam Namaskuru Sarva Dharmam Parityaga Mamekam Saranam Brajada. Just think about me, meditate on me, and give up all types of religion. And aham tvam sarva papebhyo moksha yishyami masucha. I'll protect you from all types of sin. He doesn't tell Arjuna to give up sin, he tells him to give up religion. It's a very fascinating thing. Religion are those activities, those ritualistic activities by which people perform to attain the heavenly planets, or to get some material benediction, such as a good wife or a good husband, or this or that. But Krishna consciousness is something far, far beyond that. And this verse today is speaking about how this Nalaraj gave Rituparna gave Nalaraj instructions in the art of gambling. And these are great kings. These are Rajarshis, these are Raja Rishis, very, very religious, saintly persons. They're Vaishnavas, and to one extent or another, but they're getting instructions in gambling. It's very difficult to understand Krishna consciousness. I'd like to share with you a number of different verses which describe something which Jiva Goswami explains in the Bhakti Sandarbha. He quotes the Padma Purana. Manimitam kritam papam apidharmaya kolpate mamanadritya dharmopi papam shanna prabhavata. it's a little difficult for a lot of people to digest. And it's very interesting and significant, very important for us to understand this topic, because if we want to lead a peaceful life, if we want to be successful in material terms, then we'll fall down to mundane religion. The Krishna conscious devotees, they follow Kunti Devi, who prays Vipadasham tutasasa tatu jagadguru. Let these problems come to me again and again, because when I have these problems, I can remember you. For the devotees, their primary consideration is manmana bhava mad bhakto, to always remember Krishna. And in this month of Purushottam Adhika Mas, this extra month, it's a very, very powerful thing to try to remember Krishna even more. So in the Padma Purana, there's a verse which Jiva Goswami quotes in Bhakti Siddhara, which is also quoted in Hari Bhakti Vilas, also quoted by Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Jaiva Dharma. It's a very powerful verse. Krishna speaks, he says, Manimitam kritam papam api dharmaya kolpate. There's someone who does pop, if they do pop for me, then api dharmaya kolpate, that pop becomes dharma. Whereas mama nadritya, if someone neglects me, then dharmopi, their dharma, papam shanmat prabhavataha, their dharma, the so-called dharma, becomes pop. It's a very, very significant point, very, very important point. And it's echoed in many places throughout the Vedic literatures. And we should understand it's not something which is understandable by everyone, or even something which is recommended for everyone. Srila Rupa Goswami, in his Upadeshamrita, he describes that there's so many different types of persons. What is this verse? My phone's not cooperating.
No, just so it doesn't fall.
There it is. Karmibhya parito hare priyataya vimukta ganinas tebhyo jnana vimukta bhakti parama premaika nishtas tata tebhyastha pasupala pankaja drisas tabhyopi saradhika presta tadvadiyam tvadiya sadasi tam nashrayat kakriti. He says that in Shastra, the karmis, the fruitive workers, are glorified. And a fruitive worker is appreciated if he understands the goal of life, and then he becomes favored by the Supreme Lord. But out of many, many such people who understand something, who are higher than the karmis, who are the gyanis, tebhyo jnana vimukta bhakti parama, there may be one person who understands bhakti. And out of many, many such bhaktas, bhakti parama premaika nishtas tata, someone who's nishta in understanding Krishna prem, that person is very, very rare. And amongst all the different devotees, tebhyasta pasupala pankaja drisas, that pasupala pankaja drisa, it means that those personalities who are always dependent on Krishna, who's a cowherd boy, who are those personalities? Those are the gopis of Braj. Tebhyasta pasupala pankaja drisas tabhyo pisa radhika. And amongst all those gopis, Srimati Radharani is the most exalted. So this is the conception given by our Goswamis. It's a very difficult thing to speak about, because Srila Prabhupada, for example, he gave us 4 regulated principles. And these 4 regulated principles are very, very important. And one of them is illicit sex, is very bad. Another one is gambling, is very bad. But we hear that Yudhishthira Maharaj was doing gambling. And I was just reading in Tamal Krishna Maharaj's diary about Srila Prabhupada's end days, and he transcribed some things that Prabhupada said. And Prabhupada was speaking to him about the Mullik family and how they were very exalted devotees. Prabhupada's family. But Prabhupada also mentions that they were keeping prostitutes, the Mullik family. Prabhupada said, but they were great devotees. So it's not something that Srila Prabhupada spoke about very much in public. Prabhupada stressed that we should follow 4 regulated principles. In the beginning of Rupa Goswami's Upadeshamrita, he recommends Vacha Vegam, Manasakroda Vegam, that we should control all our Vega, all our senses. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in his commentary on the verse, he says, this verse is not speaking anything about bhakti. What it's speaking about is a doorway to bhakti. So we follow 4 regulated principles not because they're going to give us bhakti. Once in London, someone came to Srila Prabhupada, a devotee, and said, Prabhupada, the the London Vegetarian Society, something, I want you to come and speak there. And Prabhupada asked him, do they want to hear about Krishna consciousness, or do they want to hear about vegetarianism? And he said, well, Prabhupada, I think they want to hear about vegetarianism. And Prabhupada said, we're not interested in vegetarianism. He said, the rabbits are also vegetarian, but who cares for that? And Srila Prabhupada, he wrote a letter to the editor of the Back to Godhead magazine once, who it put some photos of animal slaughter and the horrors of animal slaughter to convince people to become vegetarians. And Srila Prabhupada wrote him a letter and said, we are not vegetarian. We're not interested in vegetarianism. And he said, if you're going to print pictures like that, then why don't you also print pictures of illicit sex? We're also not favorable to illicit sex. We want to be Krishna conscious. We want to focus on something positive rather than something negative. And in another letter, Srila Prabhupada, surprisingly, he said, we are neither for nor against abortion. We're for Krishna consciousness. It's a very difficult thing. Even I've seen, I remember with Radhanath Maharaj, going to visit the temple of Srila Bhakti Vaibhav Puri Maharaj, who's a good friend of Srila Prabhupada. And there was a group of sannyasis meeting in a room. Somehow I had the good fortune to be in that sangha. And they were discussing different things. And there was one very senior sannyasi, not an ISKCON, but a very senior sannyasi, Gaudiya Math devotee, who was propagating that we need to preach against abortion. And we need to preach against meat eating. And I can't remember his name, but the Acharya after Srila Bhakti Vaibhav Puri Maharaj was there, and he was smashing him heavily. That we're not interested in this. This is not our program. It's a very, very difficult thing, even for very exalted devotees, to understand. It's a very difficult thing to understand Yudhishthira Maharaj's lie. And some people, we know in the Mahabharata that Yudhishthira was instructed by Krishna that he should lie. And he should say before Dronacharya that Ashvatthama is dead. And some sadhus, they say that because he told that lie, it was because of that later Yudhishthira had to go to hell, because he told that lie. But in a lecture in London in 1973, Srila Prabhupada gave a very different explanation of that. I'd like to read you from that lecture. Prabhupada said, when Krishna says that you do this, although it is wrong, you have to do it. There is no consideration Just like in the fight, the commander says to the soldiers, do this. His duty is to do that. He should not think at that time what is right or wrong. Just like Yudhishthira Maharaj, he was advised by Krishna that Maharaj Yudhishthira, you go to Dronacharya and inform him that your son is dead. It was a false information. Because Dronacharya will not die if he's not affected with some lamentation. So Krishna asked Maharaj Yudhishthira that you go because you are recognized as being truthful, Dharmaraj. So when you say, he will believe it. But Yudhishthira hesitated. How can I tell a lie? He disobeyed the order of Krishna. He wanted to become very truthful. For this reason, he had to see hell. Prabhupada said it's just the opposite. That the reason why Yudhishthira had to see hell was because he hesitated to tell a lie, not because he told a lie. Prabhupada goes on. So in the mundane consideration, there are so many things right and wrong. So long you're on the mundane platform, you have to obey all these right and wrong. But in the spiritual platform, when it is ordered by Krishna, he is above all this duality. He is absolute. So even if he says to do something wrong, because he cannot say anything which is wrong, God is all good. If you discriminate God's order from the mundane platform, then you will be misguided. Anyone who's got firm and fixed up faith that whatever God does, whatever God orders, even from the mundane calculation it may be wrong, no, that is right. That is absolute understanding. So those who are on the spiritual platform, there's no such consideration what is right and what is wrong. Their only consideration is whether Krishna is pleased. That's all. If Krishna is pleased to induce me to do something wrong, I will not hesitate to do it. I shall do it because it is Krishna's order. Tasmin tushti jagat tushtam. My principle should be, if Krishna is satisfied, then everything is all right. But while we're on the mundane platform, we should not concoct the idea that Krishna is pleased, let me do that. No, that you cannot do. You have to follow the rules and regulations. Because as on the other hand, devotees have sometimes taken this thing too. I know I had a Sankirtan leader. And we were collecting millions of dollars for the LA temple, our party. But he didn't want to spend money on new shoes and things. So he would go and steal them with the idea that, Jayananda did like that. And with the idea that we're devotees, so it's okay. And once he was arrested, and it really made our movement look very, very bad, very, very foolish. So we had to be very careful. Jayananda Prabhu was working so hard in Rath Yatra, and the only clothes, the only pants he had were this old rotten pair of jeans which had holes all through them, and they were becoming a little kind of like X-rated, his pants. So finally he walked into a store and he took a pair of jeans when no one was looking, and he pulled them on over his other jeans, and he walked out of the store, and he was caught by the store security. He was arrested. He was later taken to court. And Jayananda Prabhu, he came before the judge, and he said, Your Honor, I'm very sorry. I took these pants because I'm a monk, and I just can't tolerate spending any of Krishna's money. And he spoke with such feeling, such sincerity, that the judge was moved, and the judge dismissed the charges against him. So he can do that. He has the adhikar to do that. But if we try to imitate someone, and in the name of being a devotee, Prabhu, I can do anything, and we can cheat people. So many times devotees cheat people. I've seen sometimes devotees, I've been with them, you go through, you purchase something, and they give you too much. They're supposed to give you $5, and they give you $10 instead. And I've seen devotees with the attitude, they don't say anything. Oh, they're making advancement. They're getting some benefit because they're giving to a devotee. That's me. It's very wrong. We should give them that money back. Oh, I'm sorry, you made some mistake. I'm a Krishna conscious devotee and I can't tolerate seeing you being cheated. We should give them that money back. But at the same time, if we see a devotee who seems to not be following these rules and regulations, or as we hear in this verse today, they're doing some gambling. Yudhishthira Maharaj is doing some gambling. Or the Mullik family are keeping prostitutes. Or Srila Prabhupada speaks in several places, in Bhagavatam and also in Chaitanya Charitamrita, about the prostitutes in Dwarka. It's an extremely sinful, abominable profession. But those prostitutes were devotees. We hear also sometimes about fishermen in Jagannath Puri. We hear about the fisherman in Chaitanya Charitamrita who was collecting fish, and while he was collecting fish, he was glorifying Krishna in the form of Nrsingadev and chanting Nrsinga prayers. He was a Vaishnava. And some of those fishermen, even they're vegetarians. There's different stories like this. Maybe we'll go on and tell one or two this morning. But many places in Shastra, there are descriptions like this. Again in the Padma Purana, in the Kriya Yoga Sara, 7th chapter, it said, Haro prasane papani kutra tishtanti dehinam janmantara ajitai papar gata yuyamimam gatim. If the Supreme Lord is pleased with someone, then haro prasani papani kutra tishtani dehinam. What sinful activity remains in their body if Krishna is pleased with that person? And even though janmantara arjita papar, they may have accumulated so much sin birth after birth, still gata yuyamimam gatim, they attain this destination, they get liberation because they please the Lord. In the Skanda Purana it says, Sakarta sarva dharmanam bhakto yastava keshava Sakarta sarva papanam yona bhaktas tavachuta. O Achyuta, O Krishna, one who is your devotee, that he's done all types of auspicious activities. While someone who's not your devotee, he's a committer of all sinful activities, just by being a devotee. Who was it? Jarasandha. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that Jarasandha was a great follower of religious principles, in particular varnashram-dharma, as was Ravan. Ravan was very, very expert in chanting mantras, and they knew, Kamsa also knew religious principles, but they're demoniac, because the religious principles they're following, they were doing for their benefit. So the Krishna consciousness movement is a different kind of movement. And therefore Srila Prabhupada, in a letter to the Governor General Ronald Michener in Canada in 1968, I love this letter so much, I often quote it. Prabhupada spoke to him about the Krishna conscious movement. He wrote to him, preaching to him like he wrote letters to Gandhi. Prabhupada wrote him a letter, and he said that he defined what is the Krishna conscious movement. He said it's a non-sectarian movement. It's a non-lucrative movement. Our purpose is not to make money. And he said in the letter, he said, we have members in our movement from different backgrounds, and they can keep their respective religions and still be a member of our movement. He said, we have people in the Krishna conscious movement who are coming from a Muslim, Sikh, Christian, and Hindu backgrounds, and he says, and they can keep their religion and still be a member of our movement. It's a very difficult thing for us to understand, but it's extremely important for us to always keep in mind the principle of pure bhakti. To keep in mind this conclusion Krishna gives in the Bhagavad Gita, Mamana Bhavamad Bhakto Sarva Dharmam Parityaka. Always think of me. So abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender to me. We want to always keep Krishna Bhakti in the center of things and not keep mundane morality in the center. In the Skanda Purana it also says, Papam bhavati dharmopi tava bhaktai kritam hare nisesha karma kartava pya bhakto narake patet. That, my dear Lord, papam bhavati dharmopi tava bhaktai kritam hare. The sinful activities that your devotees perform, they're actually dharma. They're actually religious activities. But nisesha karma kartava pabhyakto narake patet. Someone who's a bhakta, who's a non-devotee, even though he's doing all types of religious activities, still narake patet. He goes to hell. We're not interested in performing just religious activities, and therefore Srila Prabhupada, he said, our business is not to feed people, our business is not to open hospitals and things. But at the same time, it's very confusing because we have Food for Life. Prabhupada wanted us to distribute food, but Prabhupada said, don't distribute food. What's correct? Prabhupada said, don't have hospitals. But if you go to Mumbai, we have the Bhaktivedanta Hospital, which seems like such a nice place. They have a deity of Prabhupada. They have Jagannath deities moving throughout the hospital. There's Prabhupada's bhajans going everywhere. This is a very subtle discussion, which devotees need to understand the difference between mundane religion and pure bhakti. It's a very subtle thing. And if we don't understand, then we become very confused by the smarta vichar, by the consideration of the smartas, and we'll think that we have to follow this varnashram-dharma system. And sometimes such devotees, they criticize Food for Life, or they criticize the Bhaktivedanta Hospital. But Srila Prabhupada criticized mundane food distribution, like the Ramakrishna Mission might be doing, or other mundane religions. But he wanted prasadam distribution done. Because by that prasadam distribution, people are going to get some kind of bhakti unmukhi sukriti. They're going to get some kind of sukriti, which is bhakti unmukhi, which guides them to bhakti. Similarly, we need to establish some system of daivi varnashram, not asura varnashram. And it's also a very difficult thing to understand the difference between the two. We want daivi varnashram. Daivi varnashram means divine varnashram. And for that, devotees need to have some proper engagement. And they need to somehow be able to preach. So there were so many devotee doctors in Mumbai. And they were working in mundane hospitals, which are serving meat and doing terrible things. And finally, they became disgusted, and they all got together, and they started Bhaktivedanta Hospital. And it's such a wonderful hospital. You can become very Krishna conscious going there. Jai Shri Shri Radha Golokanandaji. Their purpose in making the hospital is not, their ultimate purpose is not just in taking care of people's bodies. They have spiritual counselors. We knew one of the spiritual counselors at Bhaktivedanta Hospital. And that hospital, they treat people in such a nice way that when you go to the hospital, you see many Muslims going there. You don't see many Muslims going to the Hare Krishna temple, but you see many Muslims going to the Bhaktivedanta Hospital. And as soon as they come in, there's a deity of Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada's books are on display right there very prominently for everybody who comes into the hospital. And throughout the hospital, there's always Prabhupada's bhajans, or there's a couple different channels. You can hear Prabhupada's bhajans, or you can hear Prabhupada's japa, or you can hear Prabhupada's lectures. Just everybody's becoming Krishna conscious. And people who are dying there, and there's been many different Muslims and Sikhs and Jains and different persons from different religions go there who are dying because they like the way that hospital treats people. They have these spiritual counselors coming to them and encouraging them that at the end of your life you should think about God. If they're a little bit pious, they encourage them to chant Hare Krishna, like that. That's their ultimate purpose. And if we just see the external things, if we're bahirmukh janas, all we're seeing is external purposes, then we only see, oh, they're disobeying Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada said we should not open hospitals. We should not do this mundane welfare work. But their purpose is not just to take care of the body. Their ultimate purpose is to give everybody Prabhupada's books. Their ultimate purpose is to convince everybody to become a devotee of Krishna. And because they're doctors, that's their profession, they want to preach at the same time. It's not easy to understand Vaishnava principles. In the 7th chapter of Suddha-bhakti, there's a conversation Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes about one Yadava Das who's inquiring from his Gurudev, Ananta Das. And Yadava Das, he asks his Guru Maharaj, he says, Gurudev, I'm confused about this varnashram and about this bhakti thing. Can someone who's a grihastha devotee means they're taking shelter of varnashram, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't be a grihastha. Grihastha is one of the 4 ashrams. So they're taking shelter of varnashram. But if that grihastha gives up varnashram, can they be a Vaishnava? And his guru says, Bhaktivinoda says, he says, Vaishnava-dharma is very broad and generous. It's known also as Jaiva-dharma, or the religion for all living entities. Every human being is qualified to follow Vaishnava-dharma. Even outcasts may embrace Vaishnava-dharma and live as householders, and for them there is no varnashram. He's saying directly, if someone's an outcast, I've met a few like that in our Krishna conscious movement, or Yavana Malechas, who are born outside of the varnashram system. Bhaktivinoda says, for them there's no varnashram. Let me come back to this conversation in a moment. There's another conversation. Madhudvisa Prabhu in 1968, I think it was, in Los Angeles, Srila Prabhupada said something in the lecture about varnashram. And the same thing, Madhudvisa was confused about varnashram and about bhakti and how do we do things. So he asked Srila Prabhupada, what, do we have to follow varnashram? And Prabhupada asked him then, he said, when you came here, how did you come here? Did you come here by following varnashram? Were you following varnashram-dharma? And because you were following varnashram-dharma, that helped you to come to Krishna consciousness? And Madhudvisa said, no, Srila Prabhupada, none of them were following varnashram. According to varnashram-dharma, they're the most disgusting, fallen, degenerate personalities in the world. Not just eating meat, but taking all types of drugs and having all types of illicit sex. They're huge demons, completely outside the varnashram system. So Prabhupada said, you came here, what created your good fortune? Bhakti created your good fortune. And in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, Krishna says the same thing to Uddhava. I could quote the verses, I don't have them in front of me. He says that the best system to follow, better than varnashram, is bhakti. Because bhakti is something everyone can do, whereas varnashram is very difficult for a lot of people to do. And in another place, Krishna says to Uddhava that if someone practices varnashram and they mix practicing bhakti along with it, they'll get liberation because they're practicing bhakti, but they'll get kaivalya mukti. They'll get impersonal liberation by doing that. So Srila Prabhupada in many places said, we're not interested in varnashram, but in other places he said, the purpose of the Krishna conscious movement is to establish varnashram. So it's such a subtle thing. It's a very difficult thing for devotees to understand. Srila Prabhupada's purpose never was to establish mundane varnashram dharma. His purpose always was to get people to come to the point of Krishna bhakti. There is an interesting discussion. It's a little controversial. I'm sorry, we're going to say something a little controversial. Please forgive me, Boo. But many devotees, they say that it's like their Mahavakya, most important statement from Prabhupada said, 50% of my mission is not accomplished. I was very struck by that statement because I'd never seen it in Prabhupada's books. And so I did some extensive searches about it. And I came to find out that Prabhupada not even one time ever said that in his books. He never wrote that anywhere in any books. He never wrote that in any letter. It was never recorded. But Prabhupada spoke that in the room before, what was his name, Krishna Kun? Abhiram Prabhu and the Bhakti Charu Maharaj. They were present, and we love those devotees. We have great faith in them. Abhiram Prabhu later explained what Prabhupada said. It was very, very interesting. Because some devotees, and they think, oh, we have to follow Krishna consciousness like a religion, and it's very difficult to distinguish between what is varnashram-dharma and what is Krishna consciousness, between Smarta Vichar and Goswami Vichar. If you read books about Jagannath Puri, you get a big headache, because there's so much Smarta Vichar in there. But if you read Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's completely different what the devotees do when they arrived in Jagannath Puri. And we read in the, what chapter is that? I think the 11th chapter perhaps in Madhya Lila, that Maharaj Prataparudra was watching the associates of Mahaprabhu when they entered Puri, and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was telling him who's who. And Maharaj Prataparudra was very eager to see them. And the first thing he said is, I've never seen, they're doing kirtan, I've never seen kirtan like this. And Maharaj Prataparudra had seen kirtan. In Orissa, everybody's doing kirtan, practically. But they're doing it as a religion. Even if you go to the Shankar Mutt, the Govardhan Mutt in Puri, they're also doing kirtan, and they have a deity of Krishna. But their conception is different. It's Smarta Vichar, not Goswami Vichar. And so he's watching them. And Maharaj Prataparudra knows religious principles. He's watching, he said, what are they doing? They're not shaving their heads. They're not going and taking bath. They're not fasting. They're not going to have darshan of Jagannath. Instead of shaving their heads and taking bath, they're just running to see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And they're taking prasadam before they see Lord Jagannath. They're not fasting. And Sarvabhauma then had to explain, they're a little bit different. This is Goswami Vichar. It looks the same. The activities are the same. You live in Jagannath Puri and it becomes a big headache because there are many Mayavadi mutts. They worship Radha Krishna. Or they chant a Hare Krishna mantra. Sometimes they read Srimad Bhagavatam. But their conception is different. And if we're just Bahirmukh Janas looking at the externals, then we won't be able to understand. And we won't fulfill the individual purpose that we all have, which is to become Krishna conscious and get Krishna prema. And we won't be able to fulfill the purpose of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Srila Prabhupada with this movement. It'll become a mundane religion. And it has in different places. Even during the time of Srila Prabhupada, that tendency is there. We have to understand the difference between what is Suddha-bhakti and what is mundane dharma. So let's go back to Jaiva Dharma. So this guru is speaking, Bhaktivinoda is telling us about who has to follow varnashram-dharma and who doesn't. When we speak about dharma, dharma generally our acharyas define as varnashram-dharma, or many times. So he says even outcasts can embrace Vaishnava dharma and live as householder devotees, and for them there is no varnashram. Those persons who break the varnashram rules of sannyas, we call that a vantasi. Someone is eating their own vomit. Someone who's broken the varnashram rules of sannyas may, by associating with devotees, attain pure bhakti. Then they can be householder devotees. It's very difficult to digest sometimes what Srila Prabhupada did, having ladies and men live in the same ashram, giving ladies the first mantra, the Gayatri mantra. giving Yavana Malechas sannyas, and then after they've taken sannyas, sometimes allowing them to get married and still have a senior post within our Krishna consciousness movement. And some of Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers couldn't digest that. Because for them, they had a very difficult obstacle. And we know this living in India. It's very hard for some people to understand Krishna consciousness. What's in the way of their understanding? Religion's in the way. The mundane dharma is in the way. And they can't understand Krishna consciousness because there's this big brick wall of dharma in front of them. I have to take care of my family. I can't leave my family and join the temple. I'll go to hell. I have to take care of my family. These religious principles are pushing them so deeply. And in one sense, it's very good. Those people are prime candidates for Krishna consciousness because they're leading a pious life. Vacha vegam manasakroda vegam jiva vegam udada pasavim. This doorway to bhakti is open to them. Where someone is committing all types of sinful activities, it's very difficult for them. But that door, if it's closed, and all they see is the door, they can't get beyond it. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada sometimes said that the Western devotees are further away from Krishna, but they're looking toward Krishna. Whereas the Indian devotees are right next to Krishna, but they're looking the other way. So sometimes it's easier for the Westerners, paradoxically, to become devotees, even though they're coming from a very, very sinful background. And even though I've met people in Jagannath Puri who just literally sometimes, if you step on their shadow, they become disturbed. We've met people when we're doing Harinam, and we offer them a Jagannath sticker, and they won't take it because they consider us to be so contaminated and so foul. Not everybody. But some people, they're like, because they're so steeped in this smarta vichar, consideration, that they can't understand. And they say, oh my God, did you eat meat before? Then we can't ever talk to you. If you ate the cow at any time in your life. That's their conception. But at the same time, paradoxically, so many of the Pandits in Puri, they're eating fish, and some of them are eating chicken, and doing all types of activities. And Jagannath is still accepting their service. That's another difficult thing to understand. Prabhupada writes that in one letter. Let's go back to the Jaiva Dharma. Bhaktivinoda says that someone who is a sannyasi, who falls down from sannyas, can associate with devotees and attain pure bhakti, and then they can be householder devotees. And for them, there are no rules of varnashram. Baba. Those who, because of their misdeeds, have left the varnashram system may still, along with their children, take shelter of pure bhakti in the association of the devotees. Then they are householder devotees, but they're not part of the varnashram system. Householder devotees are of two kinds: those who follow the varnashram system and those who don't follow the varnashram system. And the disciple asked them, of these two, the grihasthas who follow varnashram and the grihasthas who don't follow varnashram, which is the best? Bhaktivinoda says, the one who has more devotion is the best. If neither has any devotion, he says, then according to the material point of view, the follower of varnashram is better because he's pious and the other is an outcast. However, from the spiritual point of view, they're both degraded, because neither of them have any devotion. So in the Padma Purana it says, manimitam kritam papam api dharmaya kopate mamanadritya dharmopi papam shan mat prabhavataha. It's not something we speak about at the Sunday Feast program. It's not something we talk about to new devotees. But this is there in Hari Bhakti Vilas, in Bhakti Sandarbha, in Jaiva Dharma. We should understand what is the difference between mundane dharma and bhakti. And Jiva Goswami quotes this verse from Padma Purana, Manimitam kritam papam api dharmaya kalpate. Someone who does some sin, but they do it for me, Krishna says, that sin becomes dharma. But someone else who's neglecting me, mama nadrityopi, papam shanma dharmopi papam shanma prabhavata. Their dharma becomes sin. And that's why we see so many demoniac religionists in this world today. In Russia, I'm sorry, the Russian Orthodox Church, the way many of them have treated the devotees. In Poland, the Catholic Church, the way many of the leaders have treated the devotees is terrible. It's not the fit behavior for a religious person. Sometimes they've hired gundas to go and beat the devotees, attack them, and try to take their property and do very demoniac things. These are our brothers, these religious persons. Historically, when the first Christian missionaries came to India, they did their thing. We could call it some mischief or whatever. They did their thing. They converted many people to Christianity. But when they went to Vrindavan, they became perplexed. They found a problem that they'd never found before. They would go and they'd start preaching to the local sadhus, or Brijbasis and Vaishnavas, and they found that those sadhus were very eager to hear about Jesus and to hear about the Bible. This is very interesting. Tell me more. Tell me. And they would speak to them for hours, for the whole day, with no result. They're eager to hear about their religion, but they were not interested in becoming Christians. Thank you very much. We already have our thing. But it's really nice to hear about what you're doing. That's their mood. It's very, very difficult to understand. In Bhakti Sandarbha, Jiva Goswami, and he quotes this verse, Manimitam kritam papam api dharmaya kalpate, where Krishna says that someone who does sin from me, it becomes dharma. He gives an example. And he tells a story about Tirumangai Alwar. Tirumangai Alwar was living in South India. He was a great devotee. From his childhood, he was going to all different tirthas to serve the Lord. And while he was traveling, he was preaching, and he acquired 4 disciples. And Jiva Goswami says their names were Tarka Chudamani, Dwara Unmochaka, Chayagraha, and Jala Parichar. It's a little confusing whether or not these are their actual names or these are just describing qualities that they had. I think you understand with my bad pronunciation, I hope, the Sanskrit. Tarka Chudamani means someone who's Chudamani, he's the crest jewel of Tarka, argument. He's someone, he had a mystic power, no one could defeat him in debate. Dwara Umochaka was another sadhu who also had mystic power. He could open any door, any lock. Chayagraha, this third disciple, also had mystic power. Wherever if he touched someone's shadow, the person wouldn't be able to move. And Jalo Parichar is someone he could walk on the water, like Jesus Christ. So Tirumangai was traveling with these 4 disciples, and one day he came to the very ancient temple of Lord Ranganath. And at that time, the temple was falling apart. The temple was surrounded by bushes. The courtyard, the building was falling apart. The courtyard, it said, was filled with leather shoes. And Tirumangai Alwar became simultaneously very distressed and angry to see what was going on. The servants of Lord Ranganath were coming maybe once a day because there were many tigers and jackals there. They were afraid of the wild animals. So the worship had gone way down. And he was thinking to himself, Tirumangai, that the materialistic people, they're living in big palaces with so many women and so much opulence and things, while the Lord of the universe, Lord Ranganath, is staying in his broken temple. The demons are taking Krishna's money. So Tirumangai, he wanted to do something. So he and his 4 disciples, they started going to visit rich people, and he was asking them, please, can you give some donation for the Hare Krishna temple, for Ranganath's temple? But those people had become very proud because of their wealth. And so instead of giving him any charity, they abused him. They said, "You're a sadhu. What do you need money for? Go away." But Tirumangai, he wouldn't give up his desire to do something for Lord Ranganath. And so this famous story is there that Tirumangai and his disciples, they built a gang of robbers, of thieves. And the first disciple, Tarka Chirumani, he would go to argue with somebody, and they would become so confused they wouldn't be able to do anything. Meanwhile, Dwara Umochaka would go while they're having their debate, and he would open the door of the treasury house. And then Chayagraha would step on their shadows and make it so they couldn't do anything, they couldn't move. And then Jalaparichar, he would enter the palaces that had a moat around them. And in this way, they would plunder all the wealth of everybody. But at the same time, Tirumangai, then with all this huge amount of money that he stole, he brought so many expert artists from different places, and they built this beautiful 7-story temple, which is still there today, in Sri Rangam. But meanwhile, Tirumangai Alwar was just taking one meal a day and just offering that to the Lord and taking the prasadam. He was fully surrendered and very, very simple. It's described that he had a whole gang of thieves, and that at one point, the thieves, not all of them were devotees, although they're serving a devotee. They came to him and they said, "Where's our cut? Where's our money?" And he told them that in the, what's the river there by Lord Ranganath? I can't remember. You remember the name of the river in South India by Lord Ranganath? It's a famous river, a sacred river. Anyway, maybe the Kaveri River. Yeah. Anyway, he told them that they're in an island in the Kaveri, or whatever river it was. I put your treasure. So there's a boat, you can go by boat, and you go there and you can get your treasure. So they all got on the boat, very happy. "Thank you very much, you're a good sadhu, you're honest." But they didn't realize that he put holes in the boat. And so when they're going halfway across the river, the boat sank and they all drowned and died. And they all got liberation because they'd been serving Lord Ranganath. So we can't imitate this. Srila Prabhupada makes this point in the lecture we're just reading from. We can't imitate this, but we shouldn't simultaneously, we should not criticize Tirumangai Alwar. We should understand his position. It's very difficult for devotees to understand Srila Prabhupada. How is it that Prabhupada had disciples who were doing some funky kind of things, some unpalatable, illicit things sometimes, and Prabhupada was just turning his head the other direction. Prabhupada knew about some things like that, but Prabhupada was engaging them. If we follow by mundane dharma, then we become very, very disturbed. We have to see what is bhakti, but at the same time, we also can't just do things, illicit sex or illegal things, in the name of Krishna consciousness. That it's okay, Prabhu. Those children were abused, but still they got to go to Mangal Artik. Srila Prabhupada was furious when he heard about some of the child abuse that was going on. He told them to stop this now. So both principles are there. In the Mahabharata, actually it's interesting, these three literatures which Chanakya Pandit was saying, that in the morning we should hear the Mahabharata, in the afternoon we should hear the Ramayana, in the evening we should hear the Bhagavatam. We should start off the day with the Mahabharata. And the Mahabharata is something which is not always so palatable to devotees, because aside from the Bhagavad Gita, there's really not much in it about bhakti. It's just about mundane dharma. But the interesting thing in the Mahabharata that you find repeatedly again and again and again, it challenges your conceptions of dharma. And we have a young, starting off with a young girl who's a virgin girl, but she's calling for different demigods to come and have relations with her. And she's a supremely chaste person. And then later on we hear about another lady who has 5 different husbands. And she's considered to be the topmost. And we hear about another lady, Ahalya, there's so many different examples given of that challenge our conceptions of right and wrong. In the Mahabharata, in the Karna Parva, there's an interesting story there about Kaushika Rishi. Kaushika Rishi was a famous rishi. He was famous because he'd taken a vow to always speak the truth, and he'd never told a lie. And that was his religious principle. He wasn't so much learned in Shastra, but he always told the truth. And one day, a gang of thieves were chasing some innocent person, and that innocent person came running and took shelter of Kaushika Rishi. He said, is there some place I can hide? These guys are chasing me, they're trying to kill me. And Kaushika Rishi told him, oh, go over there. And then a few minutes later, the Gundas, the thieves, they come there. And they went to Kaushika Rishi and they said, Sadhuji, we're looking for someone. Where did he go? And Kaushika Rishi had made a vow, I'll always tell the truth. And so he said, oh, he's hiding over there. And he told the truth. And then those thieves went there and they killed that person and they took his wealth. And the Mahabharata describes that because of that, Kaushika Rishi went to hell and suffered. So truth is not always the absolute principle. And varnashram-dharma is not always the absolute principle. At the same time, we can't imitate that. We had to be very careful. And Srila Prabhupada, in that lecture I was citing, he was speaking about Yudhishthira Maharaj, and how Yudhishthira was telling a lie in the order of Krishna, and how we should follow Krishna and do whatever Krishna wants. Srila Prabhupada, he concludes his discussion with the devotees by telling them that you can't imitate, you have to follow the order of Guru. You have to follow higher authority. And this is the key point. We have to accept, and who's that Guru? Guru is someone that we have faith in. And in our society, to keep everyone together, we keep Srila Prabhupada in the center. So if some Guru comes and says, as one person, one Guru in our society at one point was telling some people, take some LSD, and that'll help your japa. and some devotees followed that. That was their mistake. They should have known, no, this is not correct. Srila Prabhupada never said like this. During Prabhupada's presence, famously in New York City, there was one GBC member who had told the devotees that to offer eggs to the deities, and they were doing that. And when Srila Prabhupada came, he was angry with the GBC man. He was angry with the devotees who offered the eggs, but he was also angry with the devotees who had left the temple because they couldn't tolerate seeing that. And he was angry with the devotees who stayed in the temple and didn't do anything. He said, why didn't you speak up? And therefore in Chaitanya Charitamrita it said, Jani Sakshi Nahi Deya Tara Papa Hoy. That if you know what's right and wrong and you don't step forward and say, this is wrong. Prabhupada never said we can offer eggs to the deity. This is wrong. Then you get some sinful result from that. In the Mahabharata, it said, Janan api chayapapan shaktimanani yachati ishasan so pitenaiva karmana samprayujate. Someone who has the power to punish a sin. You're a parent and you see your child stealing money from somebody, or you see your teenage child raping a young girl or something. And what can I do? They won't listen to me. If you have some control over them and you don't do something, then you also take a result. You get some of the sin of that. So these are very subtle principles. But for devotees, the topmost principle is always and necessarily bhakti. Suddha-bhakti, sarva karma krita hoy, that Chaitanya Charitamrita says that Krishna bhakti koile sarva karma krita hoy. If we just do Krishna bhakti, then you should have firm faith that everything else has been taken care of. And even there may be some discrepancies. Mantratas, tantratas, chidram, the 8th canto of the Bhagavatam says, there may be some chidra, some fault in your mantra, your tantra, which we could roughly defined as organized religion. Mantratas, tantratas, chidram, desha kalaha vastu. According to desha kala vastu, time, place, and object, this chidra will be there, this fault. But sarvam karoti nischidram, all that chidra goes away, anusankirtanam tava, with the chanting of the holy names. We should have firm faith in it. We're the Hare Krishna movement. We're not just a movement that's come to teach about Hinduism. Hindus also worship Radha Krishna and also read Bhagavad Gita. They're also vegetarian. They also take prasadam. But we're not interested in Hindus. Prabhupada sometimes said, we're Hindus, when he was speaking to Indian people or to people to help them understand Krishna consciousness. But other times he said, we're not Hindus. And Hindu, the word Hindu is not a Sanskrit word. It's not found in any Shastra. If you go to the Jagannath Mandir, there's a sign, only Hindus allowed. But what is a Hindu by your tradition? You can't even define it. It's a word given by the Muslims when they came, and the people who were living by the Sindus River, they couldn't pronounce Sindhu, they would say Hindus River. So, and the people who were living there, they called them Hindus. So we're not interested in that Hinduism. We want Krishna consciousness. But we have to be very vigilant and careful to follow Srila Prabhupada, to follow Srila Prabhupada's pure representatives who are always going to speak about what is pure bhakti. And even if you hear the Mullik family are going to prostitutes, even if you hear Yudhishthira is told to lie, even if you hear, as in this verse today in the Bhagavatam, that this king is teaching another king about gambling, be careful. Be careful. Don't try to judge them. They're devotees. You may not do those things. We can't imitate those things. We can't imitate Jayananda stealing clothes. But we should respect Jayananda and not criticize him for that. So I'm going to stop there. It's a big subject. Small audience. So do you want to add anything, Prabhuji? Any reflections? Does it sound okay? Am I in big trouble?
It's very sometimes it's very painful to hear when devotees do apply such. I'm a devotee. Everything will be okay without the guidance, without the of his guru. Some of these man-nimitam kritam patam. They do apply and say it's okay.
Yeah, you were telling me the story. I was thinking about the story yesterday so much. He was telling me the story yesterday. The devotees were telling us the story that there was one devotee who was like really into Harinam, very exalted thing, and he was going out by himself doing Harinam with a big sign with a Maha Mantra, really ecstatic. But he also had a little strange seeing someone by himself, but he's doing a good thing. But he really wanted to help people, and he had a squirt bottle, spray bottle, filled with Radha Kund water. And he would go to every person and spray the Radha Kund water in their face. What a benediction. What a good thing, right? But people couldn't understand it. And people writing about it in the newspaper, I don't know, maybe the police came, because people think, is this acid? Is it some, what is this thing? So he was doing something which seemed like a good thing, but he wasn't following a spiritual authority. And even the spiritual authorities, I think, the senior devotees told him, please don't do this. But he wouldn't listen. And although it's the best thing, what can be better than to spray someone in the face with Radha Kund water and get them to hear the holy name? Although it's the best thing, the result was very bad. And people were criticizing the devotees because he wasn't following authority. Okay? Anything else? Krishna Kun? You got to speak, my hearing's not good.
Yeah. You quoted something from Chaitanya Charitamrita, that if you know what is right and wrong,
Right.
And you know something is wrong and you don't step forward, then you get some sinful reaction. At the same time, we understand that we want to put Suddha-bhakti always first. Sometimes these two things are very like skirting on the edge.
All of these things are very subtle. They're very confusing. Someone can quote this right here and say that anybody, if you know about some of these things and you don't do anything, then you're also responsible. But Srila Prabhupada, he knew the devotees were going next door in the Prabhupada Lilamrita, in Prabhupada's in New York. They would attend the class, initiated devotees, then they would go next door and eat ice cream with eggs in it. And Prabhupada knew they were doing it. And Prabhupada didn't say anything. And why? Prabhupada commented sometimes, what can I do if I tell them not to do it? Prabhupada, there's this one time a devotee came to Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada, is it okay if I leave my wife and I marry this other devotee's wife? And Prabhupada said, yes, that's okay, you can do that. And the devotees who were in the room were horrified. And after the devotee was very happy, Prabhupada told me I can get married like this, leave my wife, marry this other person. And after they left the room, they said, Prabhupada, how can you tell him that? And Prabhupada said, if I didn't tell him, he would have done it anyway. So by this standard of this verse of Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's a very simple thing to leave your wife and go marry somebody else. And Prabhupada's a witness. And not only is he the witness, but he's giving his anumanta, he's giving his permission to do that. So by that definition, then Srila Prabhupada, you can't accept Prabhupada as a sadhu. I'm sorry, isn't it? It's a very subtle thing. Prabhupada's principle is bhakti. And that bhakti principle sometimes is difficult to see. Krishna Kun.
So my question from this would have been, how you can help someone who has a very strong conception, she's from a good dharmic Hindu background, and has some strong conception of right and wrong, and she's in the situation when she was wronged by Monday morality, but it's so difficult for her to accept that even though she was wrong, she needs to just go on and let the principles of Suddha-bhakti act on those who wronged her. It's a very difficult thing because it's Tattva Kampan, there are so many things that are involved. She needs to really go up, but it's not so, I can't just quick start it with a
Yeah, as in practically every other question in Krishna consciousness, we have the same answer basically. Sadhu Sangha and chant Hare Krishna. When we have those misconceptions, Yavad Papastu Malinam, Hridayam Tavadevahi, I can't remember the rest of the verse. It's quoted by Jiva Goswami in Bhakti Sundarbha. It's from Brahma Vivarta Purana, why it is that some people, they're not attracted to Shastra, to bona fide sadhus, etc. He says, Yavad papas tumulinam, because their heart is contaminated with pop or with offenses. So the solution to that, we all know from day one in this movement, is Chaito Darpana Marjanam. We have to chant Hare Krishna, but we also need to have good association. I'm just say something. I don't usually speak out about my favorite personalities, but I'll say something about Niranjan Maharaj. I've seen Niranjan Maharaj again and again and again, devotees approaching him with problems. Guru Maharaj, this devotee is doing the sinful thing, this problem is going on, is this and this. And Maharaj, I've seen him over and over again telling devotees, he said, I have the same answer for everything. I only have one solution, is what one time I heard him say. We only have one solution, that you should read the Bhagavatam and chant Hare Krishna. If you're coming to me looking for a management solution, if you're coming to me looking for an economic solution, that's not my thing. I can't advise you on that. The only thing I can advise you on is bhakti, because that's the only solution he's given. And that makes me so happy to see someone doing it who has so much faith in Suddha-bhakti. It's such a very, very rare thing. And subtly or grossly, just as we have Karma Mishra Bhakti, Jnana Mishra Bhakti, we have different types of mixed bhakti. And we may say, oh Prabhu, I don't do that. But when push comes to shove, as we say, when we have to make a solution, then how many times do we have a solution based on money or based on management? And we may minimize bhakti because it's not really very practical, Prabhu. The bhakti aspect. We have to take shelter of management, we have to take shelter of money. And it's not that we don't use management, it's not that we don't use money. We do that, but those things are subservient to bhakti. Not that bhakti is second and the money is first, or the management is first. It's such an important thing. And we see what happens is if we do this, then people lose faith. They lose faith in Krishna consciousness. Okay? We should stop there. We're really over time. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Samaveda Bhakta Binda ki, Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bo, Vancha Kalpatarubhischa, Kripa Sindhu Bhyaeva Cha Patitanam, Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha, Ananda Kori Vaishnava Binda ki jai. Shri Radha Golokananda Ji ki jai.